Buonasera a tutti. Questa sera ci approfondiremo un po' tutto l'argomento della lezione di lingua, del suo svolgimento e faremo molti esempi pratici, sia nell'ambito di questa prima mia presentazione, sia nell'ambito della presentazione dei casi successivi che verranno presentati dai miei colleghi. Allora, la volta scorsa ci siamo soffermati sull'eterogeneità delle classi, sulla progettazione universale, abbiamo cercato di creare un ritratto dell'apprendente non necessariamente con una difficoltà specifica certificata, ma un ritratto di un apprendente che ha una difficoltà nell'ambito dell'educazione linguistica, quindi nell'ambito delle lingue straniere anche. Ci siamo anche soffermati sulla capacità del docente di essere un osservatore attento e di ritrarre quindi l'apprendente in un suo contesto, ma non un unico contesto, nel contesto casa, nel contesto scuola, proprio per cercare di avere un ritratto quanto più chiaro possibile del contesto nel quale l'apprendente si trova. Stasera ci soffermeremo sulla lezione di lingua e su tutte le fasi. Qui vi ho semplicemente riassunto un po' tutto quello che tratterò molto brevemente, la possibilità, ecco, di richiamare una memoria che non è una memoria unica, ma una memoria fondamentalmente di lavoro in questo contesto. Ritratteremo l'accessibilità linguistica, il carico cognitivo che si viene a sviluppare durante le ore di lezione e quindi la possibilità di progettare dei percorsi di apprendimento che siano accessibili a tutti gli studenti. Ehm, la volta scorsa abbiamo detto che il contesto assume una funzione importante perché l'ambiente nel quale l'alunno si trova, nel quale sviluppa il suo apprendimento, può amplificare o ridurre le barriere che l'alunno incontrerà durante il suo sviluppo linguistico. Ma attraverso il potenziamento di quelle che sono le competenze strategiche, quindi la decodifica del testo, la comprensione effettiva dei significati, quindi un agire in consapevolezza, unita a quelle che sono le competenze tecniche, quindi la compensazione di queste difficoltà presentate, indubbiamente l'apprendente migliorerà quella che è la sua competenza strategica e potrà successivamente agire autonomamente. Ecco, la lezione di lingua si presenta in queste fasi. Cioè abbiamo una fase della sistematicità, quindi organizzare le sequenze di lavoro con una certa struttura trasparente, la multimodalità, quindi le possibilità di accesso attraverso più canali sensoriali, l'arrangiamento, che è quindi l'adattamento delle fonti utilizzate, tenendo presente quelle che sono le caratteristiche specifiche degli apprendenti, di nuovo un adattamento e quindi una stimolazione dell'apprendimento attraverso i pari e l'interdipendenza e l'empowerment che praticamente sono collegati, sono due facce della stessa medaglia. Andiamo a vedere sinteticamente un po' le diverse fasi. Allora, nella prima fase noi dobbiamo cercare di progettare degli interventi didattici che abbiano una struttura trasparente e identificabile. Nel momento in cui noi facciamo una lezione di lingua, noi non abbiamo solo un oggetto di apprendimento, ma abbiamo qua anche la lingua diventa un mezzo di comunicazione. Quindi anche le cose che noi presentiamo devono essere in qualche modo chiare, trasparenti. Vediamo come. Ehm, poi vi parlo di questo. Ecco come. Dunque, usare quindi immagini e parole per sfruttare le risorse della memoria di lavoro. Allora, come vi dicevo, la memoria ha tante sfaccettature, no? Abbiamo la memoria a breve termine, a lungo termine, procedurale. Quella che ci interessa in modo, diciamo, più diretto per quanto riguarda l'apprendimento delle lingue è proprio la memoria di lavoro. C'è un affaticamento da parte degli apprendenti che manifestano delle difficoltà nell'apprendimento delle lingue. Questo affaticamento accorcia le possibilità di contenimento della memoria. Quindi dobbiamo cercare in qualche modo di elaborare, di rappresentare graficamente tutte quelle che sono le proposte di conoscenze che noi vogliamo trasmettere. Come focalizzare l'attenzione? Per esempio attraverso diciamo un grassetto, un font più evidente di colori per evidenziare quello che è l'oggetto dell'attenzione. Oppure addirittura possiamo utilizzare dei performance aid che sono degli aiuti, dei supporti esterni alla memoria di lavoro e che sono funzionali allo svolgimento dei compiti. Quindi per esempio un'immagine, una mappa concettuale e tutto ciò favorisce piano piano una interiorizzazione graduale di tutto il contenuto che noi stiamo proponendo. Come possiamo cercare di creare questa interiorizzazione graduale? Cerchiamo di esemplificare una serie di sottoattività, sempre in questa famosa unità didattica che noi prepariamo, una lesson plan che noi presentiamo agli studenti, dove l'attività verrà suddivisa in delle sottoattività. Per esempio, potremmo utilizzare delle anteprime introduttive chiamate anticipatori dell'argomento, del dialogo, del brano di una canzone. Come lo potremmo fare? Attraverso un brainstorming, attraverso delle attività di pre-listening, attraverso delle domande di attivazione di conoscenze pregresse, di ricapitolazione, per arrivare poi a quella che è la sintesi finale. Qui c'è un esempio di un listen and reading. In questo caso noi potremmo utilizzare maggiormente delle attività multisensoriali. Quindi, per esempio, possiamo fornire delle trascrizioni di un brano audio, possiamo utilizzare quindi la modalità karaoke, quindi queste trascrizioni che man mano, poco alla volta, compaiono. Possiamo diciamo inserire delle domande di comprensione yes or no, on true or false, o addirittura riempire delle tabelle dove noi indicheremo l'argomento, il contenuto, l'oggetto dell'attività che stiamo proponendo ai ragazzi. Oppure potremmo identificare delle parole chiave che in qualche modo saranno evidenziate e quindi risulteranno più evidenti. In questa lezione che proponiamo, probabilmente per ridurre quello che è il carico cognitivo, no? Quindi la conoscenza che si sovrappone ad un'altra conoscenza, nella lezione che noi presentiamo, addirittura anche in una mappa iniziale, potremmo creare una lezione concatenata, una chunked lesson. Questa lezione presuppone delle preconoscenze, delle attività, una sintesi finale e una anche autovalutazione dell'attività che viene svolta. Oppure, come dicevo prima, potremmo introdurre delle mappe concettuali che ci fanno rivivere, diciamo, dei momenti di ricapitolazione e quindi in qualche modo noi andiamo a evidenziare quello che è la conoscenza pregressa che ci serve in quel momento per cercare di portare i ragazzi all'interno del nuovo argomento che stiamo presentando. La seconda parte è la multimodalità. L'altra volta abbiamo parlato tanto dell'accessibilità, no? Dei livelli di accessibilità e quindi ci avviciniamo, diciamo, a questo argomento parlando della multimodalità, tanti canali sensoriali, tanta stimolazione, opportunità di input e output che noi possiamo creare all'interno di una lezione per cercare di andare a compensare quelli che sono i canali più deboli. Quindi, per esempio, ascoltare, vedere, pronunciare parole e quindi cercare diciamo, di dare un supporto, un aiuto all'apprendente che in quel momento manifesta una difficoltà linguistica. In fondo, l'altra volta ci siamo soffermati sul concetto di progettazione universale e quindi di un disegno universale per l'apprendimento di tutti. Ecco, quando parliamo di approccio sensoriale, noi possiamo creare una differenziazione sensoriale, cioè un testo che in forma orale viene presentato attraverso un audio, oltre che attraverso la forma scritta. Quindi che cosa andiamo a fare? Andiamo a differenziare il canale, ma andiamo anche a rafforzare quello che è il canale preponderante, più evidente, più diciamo maggiormente attivo e nell'apprendente. La differenziazione dei canali potrebbe anche riguardare il materiale, quindi utilizzare un materiale didattico, delle parti di un materiale didattico più utili in quel particolare momento, cercare di ordinare le attività in un senso progressivo. Prima parlavamo di multigradualità, no? Quindi praticamente di una possibilità di creare delle sottoattività prima, durante e dopo la lezione, dei diversi gradi di supporto, tipi di supporto, quali per esempio, oltre a una mappa concettuale, l'insegnamento di una strategia cognitiva, e quindi cercare in qualche modo di considerare, come ci siamo detti l'altra volta, sempre in riferimento alla capacità e alla performance dell'apprendente, i punti di forza e non i punti di debolezza. La terza fase è quella dell'arrangiamento, quindi dell'adattamento opportunamente, no, dell'output e dell'input. Quando noi ci troviamo davanti ad una compensazione, no, ad un arrangiamento dove viene presentata in maniera così evidente, no, una difficoltà linguistica, noi dobbiamo pensare, rifacendoci a quello che diceva sempre Brunner, alla zona di sviluppo prossimale, cioè a quello, no, a uno scaffolding, a un'azione graduale che va a supportare la parte più potenziata dell'individuo, quella che l'individuo può utilizzare maggiormente, e quindi ci avviciniamo sempre di più a quella che è la zona dello sviluppo prossimale. Facendo questo, quindi creando un arrangiamento linguistico, noi garantiamo un input comprensibile e sosteniamo lo studente in difficoltà nella produzione dell'output. Ecco, qui c'è un esempio, per esempio l'introduzione del past tense, quindi dei verbi. Qui potremmo giocare sui colori, quindi una tabella con dei colori diversi in cui l'alunno individua il rosso come un verbo regolare e il verde come un verbo irregolare. Se noi continuiamo in questo modo, sicuramente il colore darà a lui la possibilità di attivare immediatamente la conoscenza relativamente al passato, più che leggere il verbo in sé per sé. Questa tabella potremmo utilizzarla nell'ambito di un'attività dove chiediamo di inserire dei verbi al passato e successivamente, una volta comprovata questa compensazione, questo arrangiamento, l'alunno potrà successivamente, quindi nell'arco dell'anno scolastico, completare il brano autonomamente. Ehm, Nella quarta fase, che è quella dell'adattamento, è molto importante l'apprendimento tra pari. In fondo, nell'insegnamento della lingua straniera, questa è una cosa che si fa solitamente nell'apprendimento tra pari. Però, se noi seguiamo delle fasi, che sono quelle che vi ho elencato qui, quindi un modeling, no? L'apprendista, l'apprendente osserva le dimostrazioni dell'educatore, poi inizia a essere coinvolto nell'azione, quindi inizia a essere, per esempio, accolto, chiamato e diciamo seguito secondo i suoi punti di forza, attraverso dei supporti e attraverso un feedback che l'insegnante può dare in quel momento. Piano piano questa autonomia verrà fuori e nella fase del fading l'aiuto verrà sottratto, quindi l'alunno alla fine di un percorso sarà autonomo nel svolgimento di quell'attività. Ecco che diventa importante il concetto di interdipendenza e di empowerment, perché attraverso diciamo, un insegnamento tra pari sicuramente si promuove l'autonomia dell'apprendente, stimolando quella che è l'autoregolazione dell'apprendimento. Il nostro obiettivo finale deve essere quello. Cos'altro? Va bene, questo vi ho detto tutto. Questa è la fase dell'empowerment, che chiaramente sottolinea quello che è un lavoro cooperativo. Quindi tutta questa modalità di lavoro condivisa genera empowerment. Di conseguenza, i ragazzi si sentono più sostenuti, ragazzi che magari manifestano delle difficoltà, più rafforzati nei loro punti di forza. Allora, Josh, io mi posso anche fermare qui.
Okay, I can take
Ok?
over. We've got some slides ourselves, so one moment, and I'll share our slides. One moment. Okay, so just taking over from Roberta, and I think we're going to see some of the things she talked about also in our part. So here starts the part in English. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about MLA. Given that we're a company that runs lessons online and have done for the last 5 years, we regularly have about 8,000 students in our classes over the week, and we're going to be starting them up again very soon with expected even more numbers. We do two types of lessons, as we talked about in the promo at the beginning, the Cambridge exam preparation and also general English course, which is based on task-based learning. In these years, we've taught many students with these specific linguistic needs, okay, the BiLS, and we'd like to share some of our experiences. So I'm joined here by Heba El Sharif, who is our SEND specialist, and we also have Luke Orban, who teaches online with us. So we're going to be looking at some of the things we picked up in our experience and look at how we've both dealt with particular students or situations, but also based on that knowledge, how we've tried to make our lessons more inclusive. Okay. With that, I'm going to hand over a little bit to Heba. Okay. I will remind you, sorry to interrupt, but all of this information, both a lot of the information from Roberta's and the information from ours will be available on a handout. So all this information you'll get sent out to you tomorrow. With that, I'll ask to
Thank you.
Heba.
Thank you, Josh. So, hi everyone. Before I start, I'd like to say that I've taught in the English classroom for 15 years, and everything that we're going to talk about here, I've either used it with my students or we use it in our online classes at MLA, and this stuff really does work. So we'll start with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and what it can look like in your classroom. So you would notice that students will miss parts of multi-step instructions. So you'll be giving your instructions at the beginning of class, and then once you're done and they're supposed to start their task, they'll say, what are we supposed to be doing right now? Right after you've explained. Something like they start at the beginning of the class very strong, and then they start drifting. Their work is unfinished or rushed with small mistakes that you know that they know are mistakes, but they don't see them because they're rushing through. When they're reading, they lose their place. They're uncomfortable with long silent reading. They'll start fidgeting or get up. They talk over others. For ADHD students, it's very hard to control themselves. And it's not because they're rude, it's because they have the impulse to need to talk, and it's very hard to control it. And they have to say it, so they'll blurt it out or they'll interrupt someone. They also tend to freeze if you put them on the spot. So if you have an ADHD student and you're randomly choosing kids to speak and you say, for example, Sophia, please speak right now, you'll find that she would probably completely freeze. They have great ideas during discussions, but when they come to write, it's short or messy or rushed. When they're in groups, they'll try to lead because it makes them more comfortable to feel in control, or else they'll just float around or get distracted with something else. Some other quieter or less noticeable ways that ADHD presents is that you'll find the students are very daydreamy. They'll daydream in the middle of class when you're talking to them. If the student likes the teacher and wants to make them proud or is very interested to learn, then the perfectionism part will appear, where they'll be trying to write one sentence or do one part of a task, and they'll keep erasing it and going over it again and again and again until it's completely perfect. Another quieter presentation is at the beginning of the lesson or the task. They'll be very enthusiastic and they'll work very hard to keep up, and then they'll burn out. Sometimes you'll see the difference from the beginning of the lesson to the end. Sometimes if a task is a bit lengthy, maybe 20 minutes, you'll see that loss of energy throughout the task. An important thing to note when you're working with EFL students is that you have to check if you're teaching a kid online or you're tutoring students, then you can check with the parents. But if you're working at a school, you can check with the other teachers and check that the difficulties or the things that you're noticing are consistent with their first language or other languages that they take, with that these things happen with those same teachers. Because sometimes it might just be an issue with language acquisition load. So if they're taking 2 or 3 languages and they feel that this is very difficult for them and this is why these things appear. But with an ADHD student, you'll find that it's consistent throughout all their language lessons. If not, if it's not consistent, then it might not be a neurodivergence, but can just be a language acquisition load instead. And I'll hand over to Luke.
Thank you, Heather, Josh, and Roberta. So I'm Luke, an MLA online teacher. So I'm going to talk specifically about some students that I teach with these extra language needs and what I do in the classroom online to overcome them. So the first student is Stefano, who has ADHD, and some of the things that Heather has already mentioned are evident in Stefano. So he does blurt out quite often. So what I do in the classroom or on the online classroom is to have a rule that the students must use the emojis or they must raise their hand if they want to say something to prevent all of the students, to be honest, but Stefano in particular, from blurting out whilst I'm mid-instruction. I will have the steps, so step 1, step 2, step 3 projected on my screen, so we know, or Stefano knows, which part of the lesson we are in at that particular moment. With regards to his language, he's very good when he's in groups. He's talkative. His ideas seem to flow quite nicely. But as Heather said, that ADHD students do tend to want to dominate the group. So when he's in a group, ensuring that he's given a specific role works quite well, and allowing the other students to participate as much as they can in the group as well, if I put them into breakout rooms, for example. With regards to reading, Stefano is very good at getting the gist of a piece of text. However, he does tend to struggle sometimes with the details. So what I tend to do is chunk the reading. So just give Stefano short pieces of text, and then get him to discuss his ideas or to write his ideas down, and then read the rest of the text afterwards. What's good with ADHD students, and what I've kind of learned whilst teaching Stefano, is giving them more than one path or more than one way to complete a task. So, for example, you could give, or I'd give Stefano, for example, he could write maybe 8 to 10 lines on a particular task, or he could record maybe a 45-second or a minute-long voice note. So you're getting the student to produce, you're getting the student to produce in a way that feels comfortable for them, but the outcome is the same regardless of the route that they've taken. What is super important for Stefano is giving him kind of mini breaks during the lesson. So that will be maybe a 30-second, 45-second kind of break where Stefano can get out of his chair, kind of walk around for a brief period, just so he's not just sat stationary for an extended period of time, where, as Heather mentioned, they tend to zone out a little bit, become a little bit more daydreamy. So by giving Stefano these breaks, it benefits him, and he's more focused when he comes into each individual task. And then after the lesson, giving Stefano like a grace window. So if there's any work that he has to submit, kind of allowing him a couple of minutes to submit that work rather than having him submit it straight away works well. And then also just making sure that once he has submitted it, it is completed and it has been named correctly. So I do know that it's his work. And with that, I'll pass back to Heather. Thank you.
Thank you. So another few things we're going to talk about is common mix-up, things that you can confuse with ADHD. Sometimes students have anxiety and we can perceive it as ADHD because they're not sitting still and they're not focused. But the difference is how you can differentiate them is that when you sit with the student and you talk with them, and or you send them maybe to the school counselor, or help them talk to their parents, and things kind of calm down, then all of these things should gradually start disappearing. Another difference is reading language difficulties. So with ADHD students, they don't have something like a steady decoding problem or a certain spelling problem like we're going to talk about later with dyslexia. They just cannot focus, or they drift. Having said that, a lot of times with neurodivergencies, there's something called comorbidities, which means that a dyslexic student can also have ADHD, or an autistic student can also have some dyslexia. So this is also something to put in mind. Sometimes it's just boredom, or the task is too easy for them, or they're just not interested for some reason, and it's a long-term thing, and so you could mistake that as they cannot focus and it's ADHD. But if you create a task or assign them something that is more engaging for them, then that would disappear, and in that case it's not ADHD. So some quick supports you can use starting tomorrow, things that we use at MLA and they work, are, like Luke said, give 1, 2, 3 steps on the board, tick them off as you go, show a model, like a finished sentence or a sentence frame before starting. And this would not just benefit the neurodivergent students, it will also benefit all the other students. Use timers and mini deadlines within bigger tasks. So if the task is a 20-minute, 15-minute tasks, tell that student that you know has difficulty focusing, I'm going to check in with you after 3 minutes and make sure that you've done the plan. I'm going to check in with you after 6 minutes and make sure that you've done this. So you break it down for them. And because we use an online breakout rooms a lot of the time, so you need to be able to visit that breakout room, go in, check that they're on track more frequently than you would with other students.
Heather, can I quickly just interrupt with that as well, please? So with the timing of activities, I think it's super important that we stick kind of rigidly to those timings, because there is a tendency to allow the students generally in a classroom to kind of extend the task by maybe 2 or 3 minutes if they need a little bit more time. With students, well, with Stefano in particular, like he kind of loses concentration if then you extend the time that you've allowed, or that I've allowed, sorry, for that particular task. So I think what I've learned whilst teaching Stefano is to be quite strict with the time that's allotted for each part of the task or each task in general. So yeah, sorry.
Yep. No, that sounds good. Awesome. Another thing is you need to engage other senses. So you will have the student, if you're teaching them something, they say it, they write it, and then they use it. And engaging all these other senses together helps embed it in their long-term memory and helps them to focus more on what it is you're trying to teach them. Assigning clear roles. So if they're in groups, before they go into groups, or the first few minutes that they go into the groups, you'll go into that breakout room and you'll say, okay, who's doing what role? If you find that there's some kind of argument, you'll say, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. Assigning the clear roles really helps move things forwards. Like Luke said, the movement breaks, those are awesome. Another thing that works really well with ADHD students, but it also works with all the students, is fluid grouping. So when we say fluid grouping, we mean that you get to know your students, and then you create lists that are known to you of groups based on, so I used to have, and our teachers use this too because they have the template. They have groups of students, so they say they group these students based on academic levels, and they call these the color groups. And then they group another group of students based on their interests. So these kids like soccer, these kids like pop music, these kids like a certain sport, a different sport, and so on and so forth. Another type of grouping we do is type of intelligences. Another type of grouping we do is preferred output, how they like to present their work. And the students are taught what groups they are, so that the teacher, when they say, okay, get into breakout rooms based on your color groups, or based on your sports groups, or based on your Harry Potter house groups, whatever kind of grouping you want to do, and you know that these groups are for certain things. So for example, the colors group can be academic level or lexile reading level, for example. And then what you do is you You change the grouping often depending on the objective of the lesson. So for one task, you would want maybe kids of the same academic level together so that you can go in and support them with that task. Another group, like another task, like if you're doing descriptive writing, for example, and you want the students to, for this descriptive writing, you want them to choose all the adjectives, all the words they know, and be super engaged, then you'd probably base it on one of the interest groups. And we found that this really helps with their focus. It really helps getting them engaged and having them on task. Another one of the benefits that I love about fluid grouping is that it takes away the aspect of bullying or low self-confidence when students are grouped by the same levels. It also, so if you're grouping students, what we used to do 15, 20 years ago when I was a teacher, we used to group the kids, like the weak students together, the strong students together, and this really creates issues of bullying and lack of self-confidence. But if you have this fluid grouping and you shift through it a lot, the students aren't really aware of what they're being grouped based on. They just know that this is for this task or this is for this task. And I found that that really works. What our teachers do after class, the first few minutes after class are really important because the teacher is everything's still fresh. And what we like to do is, if we have an ADHD student, for example, we say, okay, how many instructional steps could they follow independently? How long could they stay on task before drifting? And we use all of this information when we're planning for the next lesson. And that's it for ADHD. Could we go on to the next one, please?
Sorry, is that the next one?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is ASD, or autism spectrum disorders. Before we talk about this, I just need to say that autism is a spectrum, like in its name, and some students will have a lot of the traits, and some students will have just a few of the traits. And so not all ASD or autism spectrum students or children will be easily diagnosed, and some of them might not be diagnosed, but you as their teacher, you would be able to pinpoint these things, notice them, and then adapt to them in class. Okay, so what it can look like: communication. So they take the language literally. They miss jokes. They don't understand the jokes, the idioms, the sarcasm. What you say, they understand it as it is. Sometimes the way they talk when you have a conversation with them is very formal. Interaction, they prefer to work alone or with a trusted partner. So when we're doing the fluid grouping thing, I tend to keep autistic students with a buddy. Even if they're moving from group to group, then we keep them with a certain buddy. They're not able to read social cues. Turn taking is difficult. Personal space is difficult, and group work is kind of exhausting for them. So sometimes I'll tell them, like, take a little break. Okay, the rest of the group will continue. Take a few seconds, like take 20 seconds break, take a little break, and then come back. Get up and stretch, and then come back. Their learning style, they're very strong with facts, with interests, and they're much weaker with inference. So if you know what the Bloom taxonomy is, so they're closer to the base of the pyramid, where it's about knowledge and memorization, and they find it much more difficult when it goes higher to things like synthesis and reflection and creating. Okay, they feel anxiety with open-ended tasks. So they need clear, predictable steps and an expected outcome, like a kind of framework. With sensory regulation, you might notice that they're sensitive to noise. If another classmate in the online classroom is loud, or if the teacher raises their voice, you'll find that this is very, you'll see it on their face that they're not happy. They might fidget or shut down if they're overloaded, and they struggle with sudden changes or unpredicted changes that are not routine. Quieter or masked presentations, things that we often miss are that they socially copy the people around them to be able to fit in. Another thing is that advanced vocabulary, they have advanced vocabulary, but they have a difficulty with pragmatics, like hidden meanings or tone or implied. What else? With the EFL, it's basically the same with the EFL note, is that don't judge the student on just in your class, because they might have there might be language acquisition load. Always talk to other teachers, or if you're tutoring online, then you can ask the parents, and the parents can ask the teachers at school, are you noticing anything? The tutor noticed this or that, and so on and so forth. Over to you, Luke.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. So yes, with teaching online, I've got a student, Alessandro, who is on the autism spectrum, and like Heather mentioned previously, he does take things quite literally, okay, and it takes him maybe slightly longer than others to process instruction. He does like to work with particular students in the class. I mean, there was only 7 students, so it's not a huge amount of students, but there are 1 or 2 in the class that he prefers to work with. And to kind of negate any distraction for him, he does tend to wear headphones, so any kind of background noise is nullified. So what I do with Alessandro before the class, I'll send him like an agenda or an outcome, and mark any changes. So if I've got 1, 2, 3 steps, but we're going to do step 3 before step 2, I will mention that to him before the lesson, so he knows it's not going to go in numerical order. We're going to do it slightly differently, so he doesn't get thrown by that when it happens. And if we are using kind of idioms, for example, or any specific words and phrases, I'll give those to him before the lesson, so he has those to hand. If it's an idiom, I'll give him the meaning and an example, as you can see on the screen. So obviously with idiomatic language, it's inferred, it's not explicit, it's kind of creative. So Alessandra has that before the lesson starts. Like with ADHD, I do tend to have steps projected onto the screen, so the students can see where we are in the lessons. As I mentioned briefly before, when I'm asking Alessandro for a response, I allow him a little bit more time than the other students. So maybe I'll ask him to respond to something, maybe have a 5 or 10-second pause, and then invite him to answer. Again, I'll give him the choice on how he responds. So he could either write it in the chat, or he could verbally express his response. What's good on Zoom as well is the whiteboard function, and you can create like an idiom or an inference box. So any opaque language or any new language which is unfamiliar to him, you can write that into the box, have that projected onto the screen in the classroom, and then that can stay on the screen throughout the class. So Alessandro can keep referring back to it. And then what I do with him after the class is I provide Alessandro with a model answer, so he can then compare his work with a model output. So he can see what he has done quite well, what perhaps he may need a little bit more work on, and he can relate it after the lesson has finished. Thank you, Heather.
Okay, let's go to common mix-ups. Okay, so other things that autism we can confuse it with is ADHD, but ADHD, they're off task and they're impulsive across many activities, not across specific ones. Another thing that we can mix it with by mistake is social anxiety or selective mutism. speech there is limited by fear, but it improves with reassurance and gradual exposure. In the case of autism, it wouldn't improve with the reassurance and gradual exposure. Maybe it would improve, but the approval would be very gradual and much slower than it would with any of the other two. Oppositional behavior, also something that we can confuse with autism. What you may see could be avoidance from overload or unclear expectations. And so this causes oppositional behavior, and it's not actually autism. Something we also like to rule out is any hearing or vision issues. Sometimes students can't hear very well or can't see very well. And this would be something that you'd notice more in an in-person classroom. And we're going to be talking about in-person classrooms next week, but it could also manifest in online classrooms. Quick supports you can use tomorrow. You can input these in your lesson plans from tomorrow. Predictable routine, an agenda on the board or an agenda that you send out before the lesson. You can send out the day before, you can send out an hour before, you can post it on the whiteboard in your online class. Clear instructions, like Luke was saying, 1, 2, 3 steps on the board and providing a simple model. So this kind of scaffolding benefits all the students, not just the neurodivergent ones. Processing time, again, like Luke was saying, give them some time to think things, 5-10 seconds. Figurative language books, when there's an idiom, write the literal meaning and write what it really means so that they don't have to guess that. Don't leave them to guess. Choice and roles, give them, like we said, 2 task pathways. Sensory support. So you can allow discrete or quiet fidget spinners or noise reducers. My favorite one is plasticine or Play-Doh. I'm not sure what they call it in Italy, plasticine or Play-Doh. But I've worked with students who having something in their hand to squish or to manipulate really helps them calm down, really helps them cope with change. Some of them prefer the fidget poppers. They make like this popping sound, or Lego pieces. I've had a student in class who had those mini Hot Wheels cars, and on his desk while we're in the online class, he would just move them around and keep organizing them and reorganizing them while he was listening. He wouldn't look at us, but he would be listening. And I know this because at the end of the class, he understood and he heard everything. Like Luke was talking about alternative ways to respond. If the task is not, if part of the objective is not, for example, writing, and they're doing a piece of writing and it needs to be the writing itself, the punctuation or the spelling, or you can give them choice boards. You can let them choose how they will output in a way that showcases their learning in a way that they're comfortable with. I just want to warn you a bit with choice boards or allowing them different outputs is let them do that most of the time because they're comfortable with it. But you also need to push them out of their comfort zone sometimes. Have them try, if you're doing an objective or a skill that they're a bit comfortable with, then you can ask them to try a different method of output so that we don't, part of our job as teachers is to help them so that they can cope later on in life. And in life, they won't only be using one way of output in work or whatever. So you need to push them out of their comfort zone a little bit with that. What to jot for your records, what we train our teachers to do after class, basically, is take notes of the triggers and supports that you found helpful, the noise, the transitions, the groupings, these things work for the student or not, which visual routine worked, comprehension notes, are they struggling with something in specific? What are the signs of overload and what's the recovery time? And then use this information when you plan for the next lesson. Being very vigilant and noticing or focusing very much on your students, finding out their interests, finding out what works and doesn't work for them in the beginning makes the learning journey with them much easier and much smoother. And I found that teachers we have who sorry, who do this hard, it's a lot of hard work in the beginning. By the end of the course, their students are engaged, their students have learned, their students are on top of things, right? So it really is worth it. And now we are going to move on to dyslexia. Okay, so dyslexia, what does it look like? Reading is slow and effortful, frequent sounding out of words, guessing the first letter and then losing place. Spelling is inconsistent, and by spelling is inconsistent, I don't mean that they spell the same word wrong the same way. You'll find that the same word can be spelled within the same paragraph in several different ways, but it will always be spelled phonetically. Phonetically means that the way they hear it is the way they write it. Okay, so this is one of the strongest things that you can notice with dyslexic students. Their written work lags behind their oral ability, so they have strong ideas in discussion. They're really smart, but when they're tasked with writing something, then it's messy or it's short, or they just don't want to do it because it's extremely frustrating for them. Trouble with new nonsense words. When I say nonsense words, I mean words that have silent letters, words that spelling is not close at all to phonetically, to their phonetics. And there are a lot of words like that in the English language, and you'll find that they struggle very much with these words. Other quieter presentations that we've noticed as teachers is that dyslexic students are very hardworking because they're smart and because they know that they can do it. But there's a barrier. It's like someone who's going uphill, but there's something really heavy tied on their back, and they keep trying and they keep trying, and it's a struggle. So most of them are very hardworking, but a lot of them also have low self-confidence because they're smart and they feel like they put in so much work, a lot more than their peers sometimes, but they don't get the same results. Like we said with the other two students we talked about, like the ADHD and the autism, check that, talk to other teachers and check that the things that you're talking about are consistent. With regards to dyslexia, I would check with other language teachers. And that's it. On to you, Luke.
Perfect, thank you, Herbert. So I'm going to talk about a student that I taught last year on the Cambridge exam preparation course, Sophia, who has dyslexia. So I found with Sophia, when we were doing silent reading, like her camera would occasionally go off, or she would ask me to kind of share the page again. She'd lose her place in the text quite frequently, and she would avoid reading out loud. So to kind of overcome this, what I would do with Sophia is have paired reading. So her and a fellow student in the class would read together rather than read it in front of the whole class or reading to me. This way she's able to, or she was able to kind of listen and follow the text a bit closer, working with a peer as opposed to listening to myself. And with, as Heather mentioned, with spelling and kind of typing, what Sophia would do is, like Heather said, she would inconsistently spell certain words, but also kind of fixate on that word during the writing task. So what would often happen is that she wouldn't produce as much as she would be able to, because she would just incessantly focus on that word, and it would kind of take up a lot of her time during the writing task. However, when Sophia was placed into a breakout room, she was extremely chatty, extremely engaged, would give all sorts of ideas to her fellow students. However, if she was the note taker in her group or in her pair, the notes would be kind of messy, very short. So not ideal, but if you can get her to, well, what I did was get her more often to kind of speak, and then somebody else would be the note taker. So then her ideas are being kind of elaborated on, maybe. And then that would be the same with me. So if I asked her a particular question, she would prefer to answer me verbally rather than type the answer out. So what I did throughout the course, once I became more cognizant of this, was I would, yeah, I wouldn't put Sophia under so much pressure to type me the answer, but to get her to respond verbally, which I think worked pretty well. And then you can always use apps. Sophia had an app which was text to speech. So if I did give the class a piece of text to read, Sophia would put that into the application that she had, which would then read the text out loud, and then she would respond with a speech to text. Obviously, we do, whilst we're preparing for the Cambridge exam, the students do need to practice their reading and writing, but it's about kind of making them feel comfortable and in their responses and incrementally getting them to do it rather than kind of expecting them to produce straight away. That's what I found with Sophia. And then also as well, like we've said with the other students that I taught, Alessandro and Stefano, giving Sophia perhaps more than one path or more than one kind of way to complete the task worked quite well. And again, having the steps on the board, 1, 2, 3, so we can follow the precise order. Also, something else that's really important is having the whiteboard projected in an uncluttered way. So the whiteboard is very easy for the students, for Sophia, to follow. And using large sans serif text, so like Arial or New Times Roman, making it quite large on the whiteboard so Sophia, the students can read it clearly, with decent line spacing. So 1.5 line spacing works quite well. So they are able, so the students are able to read the text clearly and respond in a way that we want them to. Cool. Thank you, Heather. Back to you.
I might just interrupt just to point out that talking about Cambridge exams, we do have in 2 weeks in our webinar on not next Thursday, but the Thursday after, we will have a special guest from Cambridge exams who will be talking about how they make their exams more inclusive. So a lot of these things that Luke does in the lessons are also found in the exam so that they allow students a bit more time, a bit bigger text, sans serif, things like that. Okay, so please join us again in 2 weeks for more information about the assessment side of it. Okay, that I'll pass to Heather.
I just want to mention, don't worry, I know we've gone over time, but we're nearly done, nearly there. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the common mix-ups for dyslexia with ADHD. Their attention drifts in many different tasks, but with dyslexia, you'll find it's mostly just reading and spelling. Other language disorders or cognitive disorders have bigger issues. With dyslexia, it's mostly decoding. If you focus, you'll find it's the decoding that's the problem. Lack of phonics practice is something that is very commonly confused with dyslexia. What do I mean by lack of phonics practice? If these students didn't have a strong foundation in phonics, you may think that they're dyslexic. The difference is when you work with both of them, the ones who just didn't have a strong foundation in phonics will pick up much faster than the dyslexic students will. Quick supports you can use tomorrow. Like Luke said, pre-teaching keywords, allow them access to a personal word bank. I think look at the back of the Cambridge Prepare books, there is a personal word bank, right? Okay. Chunk the
sorry,
reading.
I forgot to mention.
Yeah, no worries. Chunk the reading into short paragraphs, give them audio support, show models and frames before writing, sentence starters. Scaffolding is something very important for dyslexic students and for a lot of neurodivergent students, but we're going to talk a lot more in detail about that next week. Allow phonic spelling and drafts, phonetic spelling. So if they make spelling mistakes in drafts, just don't point them out. And if you read a piece of writing for a dyslexic student, you'll find that there are a lot of spelling mistakes. But if you keep pointing out all of those spelling mistakes, they become very quickly discouraged. So as long as the objective of the lesson or the thing that we're working on or testing that lesson is not spelling, I would just let it pass and focus on whatever the objective of that lesson is. Offer them alternatives to heavy reading or writing, like give them oral answers, voice notes, a scribe. I know that Cambridge allows scribes in, my son has dyslexia. He went through his IGCSEs. He was allowed a reader and a scribe. This is one of the kinds of scaffoldings that we're going to talk about next week, the scaffolding that you can keep going because it's allowed in the final exams, or the scaffolding that you have to withdraw or wean them off. You can give them extra time, reduced reading load. The layout matters, exactly what Luke was talking about with the font and the spacing. And there are attachments that they can put on their screen that you can probably get it off Amazon. There are different colors, they're filters. I found that most students will be comfortable with the yellow. Some of them are comfortable with other colors. You can ask them to get a pack that has different colors and they just change the screen filter. It really helps with their reading, and encourage assistive technology like text-to-speech or spell checkers. The last thing I'm going to say is what to jot for your records at the end of the lesson is the reading behavior, do they lose their place? Are they guessing? Are they slow? The spellings patterns, are there phonetic errors, or are the errors random? The gap between the oral answers and the written output. And the most important one is what helped them the most. So when we send teachers, classroom teachers or general teachers on send strategies, we always say, don't take on too much. So try something with your student. If it works, keep it going. When you're comfortable and they're comfortable with it, then try something else. So you'll take it bit by bit. And after each lesson, you'll know this worked with this student, this didn't work with this student, and so on and so forth. And it's an ongoing process. Thank you very much. On to, I believe,
Thank
Roberta.
you, Heba. Roberta, vorresti aggiungere qualcosa?
Allora, io vorrei solo aggiungere questo, che diciamo quest'ultimo caso, quello sulla dislessia, è un caso da inserire in questa categoria che abbiamo individuato come BiLS, cioè bisogni linguistici specifici. Gli altri due, l'ADHD e l'autismo, sono inseriti nella categoria dei BES, cioè sono dei ragazzi che hanno a loro carico una diagnosi di disabilità. Quindi bisogna cercare di non fare confusione, perché questo può portare sia nelle classi, diciamo che noi viviamo in Italia, c'è una differenza ben precisa. Nelle vostre classi chiaramente c'è tutta diciamo online, c'è tutta una situazione da capire caso per caso. Ecco, questo ci tenevo a dire perché sennò andiamo in contrasto con quello che poi io ho detto la volta scorsa. Quindi invito i docenti a riguardare gli schemi che abbiamo proposto nell'handout della scorsa lezione. E poi niente, poi ci sono, vabbè, dei riferimenti al setting e al tempo che ovviamente hanno una certa importanza, collegati all'utilizzo delle breakout rooms. Mi fermo perché è tardi.
Yeah, very important point too. So yeah, we covered like some other sort of SEN things, not just the BiLS. But anyway, just to conclude, I'd like to remind everyone that you will receive a webinar handout in the next few days. We should send them out tomorrow or Friday. Check your spam folder, often it goes in there. But if you don't receive it, email us at formazione@mlaworld.com. And if you've attended last webinar and this one, okay, that's 2 webinars. So we will send you out a certificate at the end of the series. Please stay around for the other 2 as well, though, and you just need to attend 2 or at least 2. Okay, but I think you'll find the next one and the one after very useful as well. All the information from the slides and a lot more will be in there. Okay, and in fact, a lot of the stuff that wasn't on the notes that Luke talked about is in there too. Okay. Look, I'd like to thank our presenters, Roberta Tardi, Heba El Sharif, and Luke Orban very much. Okay, it's I hope you found something useful to help you in your future lessons, and I thank everyone for attending. Our next webinar will be next week on Thursday, not on Wednesday next week, but on Thursday. And it will be about BiLS, maybe a bit of SEN as well, okay, and teaching in person. Okay, so today we looked at the online. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at some different aspects that are going to help you with your teaching in person. Thanks, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Okay, thanks for.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.